Hello, in this video we're going to start modeling the station. And to begin with, we're going to start out with a grid. And the first part we're going to focus on is the screens. So we're going to make a procedural screen. So first of all, I'm going to place my grid a bit better. Like this. And I'm also going to make sure I have a better scaling. Something like this maybe. Also, I have a lot of polygons right now, and I would like to have a clean plane. Then I'm going to bevel the edges here. So we'll be using the bevel node. And in this bevel node, I'm going to select which points I want to bevel. So I will be selecting these two and press enter to confirm. And when we bevel, we can see that we have now beveled these edges. Then I'm going to extrude this. And I'm going to scale down this part so it's a bit more interesting. And I'm going to save out the front as a group. So in here we have the front plane, and I would like to have that in a group. Then I'm going to use a transform node, and in this transform node I'm going to use this front group that I just made, and now we can actually move this piece separately. So maybe I'm going to move it to the right a bit, and I'm also going to keep extruding, and I will be still using the front extrude. So we are only extruding on this primitive, and with this front extrude, if we just keep using the front extrude, we can keep beveling a screen. So this is like the frame, and then this is then the screen. So here is the screen. So if we change our grid of shape, we can see that we can change the screen. Then I would like to have some more details. And from here, I want to select a few sides and add some beveling information there. So I will be converting the line. And what this is doing, each line is now a primitive. So if I go back here, we see that everything is one big primitive. So Houdini sees this as one big primitive. If we convert the line, we can now see that Houdini sees these individual. So in total we have 6 primitives here, which go from 0 to 5. What I'm interested in doing is in the carve node. Place a carve node here, and we enable the first U and second U. We can see that we can control this line on how far it's going. So if this is 0 and 1, we keep the same size as before, but as soon as we start sliding, we can cut out certain pieces. So for example, let's take 0.3 and here 0.7, and I want to use this information then. So I can, for example, use a sweep node, and in this sweep node, we could, for example, use the new feature here, which is called a round tube. So we instantly have a round tube, and we can also close this shape here by adding gaps. And we can start booleaning this shape in here, and let's see what results that we are going to get. And I will be subtracting from each other. And as you can see, we are now subtracting these parts from the screen. You can also see that I don't have a backside on my screen. Maybe I can add a backside. So if you go back here to this extrude, we can enable the output back here. And now we also have a closed geometry. And this will work a little bit better in the Boolean, as you can see here. Further down in the sweep, we can add some interesting settings. What if we actually choose the grid option? Then we can see that we're getting some nice round edges here. And let's say we want 4. Maybe I want to rotate my shape. So in here I can go to the roll, and I can rotate my shape 45 degrees. And if I now boolean, I'm getting these shapes. And then we can also make them pointy by doing this. but maybe you don't want everywhere these booleans. So what we could do is using the range node, and in this range node, group range node, we can start filtering out some of the edges. So if you just here on the off, play around with it, we can see certain areas are now not selected. So based on what you like, you're gonna have to make the selection here. The last thing to do is give it a proper name. So I'm gonna give it a clear name. I'm gonna call it to sweep. So we know this is the information I want to sweep. And here I want to fill in the group node, which is called to sweep. And now only these pieces are now being swept. So we don't have this boolean everywhere. So by changing again these settings, we can see that we can play around with where details are going to be placed. Then next up, I'm gonna make something here for the back, and I'm gonna use a quick group node. And with this quick group node, I can here drop down and select the back quickly by using minus X. And now I can use this in an extrude node. So here in the extrude, I can fill in here which group I want to extrude, which is in this case selection. And we can now start extruding this. And again, we can save out the front group, which is this one. And if we use another extrude node and fill in the front group, the extrude front group here, you can also see that we have still the old one active. So what I'm going to do simply here is I'm going to put a number in front of it. So this is extrude number 1. So number 1. And now we can, for example, start playing around with the scale. So now we can, for example, place down an inset here, like this. And we also need the front group again. And I'm going to put a 1 here as well. Then I'm going to copy this. And then I can extrude this further. So we have something that, for example, looks like this. It could be used as a screen. Now here we can use the Sci-fi details again if you want to. And I'm going to create a quick groups. And I'm going to call it primitive to detail. And this is done everything in a positive X direction. And then we can here slide on which primitive I would like to have the detail. So let's say, for example, only here. Then I use the Sci-fi detailer. And I can then fill in my group, which is then surface to detail. And let's take style 2. So style 1, we might have to tweak the settings where we would like to have it. So if you use style 1, you might have to tweak it, but I'm going to use style 2. So we have these lines in there. So again, based on this tolerance, we can then apply where we are going to have all these detail. So in here you can see there are more details placed. Now for a second part, I'm going to make a small model. So I'm going to use a box and we're going to place something here at the bottom. Some sci-fi detail here. So this can be used as a keyboard or something else if you want to. So I'm going to start out with a box, place it something like this. And I'm going to start using the group nodes again, quick grouping. And here what I will be doing is selecting the X and minus X. And then we also split the geometry. And the second input is actually the reverse of what we are seeing. So if I would put a null here. So the second input of this group node is the reverse of what you have been selecting. And I want to bevel the reversed one. So in here, I'm going to place bevel. And I'm going to increase the distance, and now we have beveled these edges. Then to fill back the empty space, I'm going to use a polygon fill and place it down here. And now we have filled up this space, but I would like to have a single polygon, so it's clean geometry. Then I will be using the grip groups again, and I will be only needing the x-axis, the positive one. And I will transform this. So what we'll be doing, if we compare the other box, I want to boolean some parts of this in here. And I might want to scale that down. So I want to boolean a certain space in there. And I'm going to extrude my plane, so I can use it in a boolean. So I'm going to extrude it. I'm also going to make sure my shape is closed. So in here I enable the back, and now I can boolean these shapes from each other. So as you can see here, and I'm going to use subtraction, and now I can boolean this from each other. So by tweaking some of the values, we can also have this. If we play around with the transform, I can then also decide how much I want to boolean. Then I would also like to do a similar system that I did here. And I might actually just copy this part and place it over here. And let's place the box in there. Now you also have these shapes here. And what I would like to do is also use a group node here, quick group nodes, because I don't want this everywhere. So I'm going to use a quick group nodes, and let's say only the front axis. So we can again here decide where we want it. So let's say if we want it everywhere, and let's boolean this in. So we're going to use boolean, and also let's subtract it. And now we have this shape. What we could also do here is we can go back to our box, make it smaller, then we can have these shapes going on. So it might happen that you might not really be happy with, for example, what's going on here. This is not that nicely done. So we're going to make some changes here, and instead of using the round tube, I'm going to use the ribbon. And then we have a shape like that. I also don't want the end caps anymore, so I'm going to click on none, and I only want to have no primitives in the middle. And you can see that they have like this weird orientation. So in here, I want to go to the construction, and we have up vectors. So they basically are now targeting by the curve normal. I want to go into custom, and I want to fill in 1, 1, 1. And you can see that they are now all facing the right direction. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bevel this. If we bevel the edges, we don't see really anything happening. So it's beveling the edges, but I would like to bevel the points. So in here, I would go to points, and now we can start beveling these points. Then I would use the game dev thicken or the SideFX Labs thicken. And I want to both sides. And I can use this in my boolean. And now we can see a consistent boolean here. So you could use the same system here and integrate it here as well if you feel like it needs it. Then here we could also do the surface detailing. So I'm going to copy these two nodes and place it down here. So I will be selecting faces where I would like to have detail, and then I would start applying detail. And it also creates here this nice opening. So now we have this piece. And I can merge these two parts together to have my first look more at my screen. And we can always go back here and start adjusting where you would like to have this piece. So it's going to automatically scale with your settings. So if I make this way larger, we can see that everything still holds up. Then what I will be doing next is I'm going to play around with the symmetry. So in here, I'm actually going to use the symmetrize to get my variations in screens quickly. So I'm gonna copy this a few times, and by just making difference in symmetry, I can actually get a lot of variation in my screens. So I'm just gonna copy the node over and over again, and I can see I get some variation. So maybe this one is not really good because at the bottom here, this not aligns really well. So maybe I just manually tweak this part in here. And now I have this screen and so on. And then you can make more variations if you want. So we can use the switch node to switch between all these different screens. So what we can simply do here in Game Engine, we can expose this value, and then I can switch between which tile I like to have on my prop. So this is an easy approach to get some variation with like the same input. And I'm giving this null node, and I'm call this the base of my screen. So out base screen. Next thing I will be doing is I want to make like a small computer part on the side of the screen, and I also will be using a grid for that. So I'll be starting with the grid here again, and I'm going to do the same thing, position it better first, lower the amount of rows and columns, and also give it a better size. What we can actually do here is we can link my original grid to this grid. So if I would, for example, change how high it's going, I can also link the size. So I'm going to right click on this part, and I'm going to say copy parameter. Then I will go back to my grid here that I started. I'm going to select the one, and I'm going to place a reference, so paste relative reference. And we can see here that we now have pasted this reference in there. So every time if I change my base grid from my screen, I will also scale automatically this side part with it. What we can also here do is also position it better. So as I mentioned it, I want to have it on the side. So we can also ask the bounding box and put it on the side. So we can already use this null node here and ask what the bounds will be. So on the z-axis, I would like to automatically position it here. So I'm going to use a little expression here. And what I will be doing is asking the bounding box of out base screen. And I would like to know what the maximum z size is. So z max. Then we can press apply. And then we can see it's automatically being placed here. I actually want to have it on the right side, so maybe I should have taken the minus one. So z minus. We can also see now if I would show this, it's now sort of like overlapping this part, and that's because of the size here. So we should also include the size in this information. With reference the size of this part also in here. So I'm gonna add then the size here as well. So an easy way to do this is, first of all, I'm gonna select what I have here, and I'm gonna copy it by Ctrl+C, and then I will be referencing this part. So I'm gonna drag this value in here, relative channel reference. Now this reference is being created, and I can now add this and copy paste back my value. Because I'm using here the minus, z min, this value, the z size, should be also minus. So I'm going to put in front a minus, and then we can see it's automatically moved here. So this size I'm going to divide by 2, and now it's perfectly aligned with my screen. So if I increase the size, we can see it's perfectly staying there. Then I'm going to extrude it, and I'm also going to enable the output back, so it's a closed shape, and I would like to save the front as a group. So what we can do here with the front group is we can, for example, rotate the front group here, and I would like to have my pivot on this primitive. So you can do this on multiple ways. So you can, for example, use centroid and then fill in 0 and dx, and then use this code in the others as well and change every time the axis. So this is one way of doing this. There are other ways as well. So now my pivot is centered here, and I can rotate my front group. So as you can see, I'm only rotating the front group. So I can rotate this part more to the screen. So if someone is close to the screen, they can see this panel better. Then I will be blasting this part. So extrude front group, so it's blasted away. But I actually want to reverse it, so I actually see it. And I'm going to extrude this part, as you can see here. And then I can start extruding it. I'm also going to give it an inset. And you can bevel the result if you want to. What I'm going to do with this result, I might need to also close this. What I'm going to use this result for is I want to boolean this part in here. And I would like to subtract it. Then we can use a transform here with the centroids filled in. A small trick to quickly get, for example, this filled in automatically is either you make a preset, which you can do here, save preset. You can then click on it and then make a new custom preset, like center pivot, for example. Another way you can do this is if you open here the shelf tools, you can basically drag this in here, and every time you press in center, you will see this node center. So I already have it, and I'm gonna delete it back. So that's just a small trick on getting that quickly. And now we can start booleaning this shape in here. You can also scale it and place it better. So depending on what you like or what you're looking for, we can have that result. Next up, I'm going to place some buttons here, and I will be using a poly expand for that. And with this poly expand, I want to connect it at the blast node. And with the poly expand, I'm going to say where my buttons have possibilities to be placed. So if I disable the outside, I can use this poly expand node to then safely define the area. And then I'm ready to create some points on this. So again, here there are multiple ways on how you could place down some buttons. And here I'm going to divide it. And in the divide node, I'm not going to triangulate it. I'm going to use the bigger polygons. And if we lower this size, we can see that there are polygons added. So the lower you start going, the more grid shapes you will see going on in here. We can also have a transform here in between. And you're going to see that if we change the scale, the buttons will have a consistency in the size because of the divide node. So they all have this as size. And I can then extrude this. And on top here, I will be extruding on individual elements, so I can have this button shape. And you can merge this result. And I can see it's not being placed nicely. So either we change the position here, or we can always afterwards use a transform with the correct center and then place it in here, for example. So we have a base panel on the side. So we can then merge the results. And this is then, for example, the result. So you can always go back to certain nodes and start tweaking values if you would like that. One more thing we could do is we, for example, can add a hologram for my keyboard. So what I will be using for that is a grid, and this grid, I'm gonna change this rows and columns back to 2, and I'm also going to scale it in a better form, something like this. So this can be my keyboard, and it's a hologram that is being placed like this around here. What I would also like to have is that this position, the z-axis, is automatically decided based on how big my screen is. So if I have a variation in my screen, my keyboard is automatically moving with it. So in here, I'm gonna ask the centroid of the screens. So we used this before, so out base screens, and I would like to know the z size, so d underscore z. And now we have this placeholder for a keyboard. And we can also go back here, increase the size, for example, make it a wider screen, and then we can see we have some variation out of the box by having that slider. Also, this might not be the best position, so but we can later add some parameters to control that.